There's not enough homes. And I think that this next group of articles illustrates that really well. This one from Realtor.com saying that home ownerships are falling for all ages, not just millennials. I'm just going to cut to the end quote here from the Realtor.com article. It says that the result is that home ownership is increasingly functioning less like broadly accessible wealth building tool and more like a financial milestone reserved for those who are already well positioned to begin with. These affordability pressures, they're kind of hitting younger buyers. They're making the average first-time home buyer get older and older. And we also, in the Realtor.com article, we get a reference to that lock-in effect where, rates were really low and they're not selling. Although I've seen data that suggests otherwise, that lock-in effect is really fading after so many years of elevated interest rates. So that's a little bit of like a reassurance, but homeownership is still lower than it should be. And I think that the charts in the similar apartment list article explain things a little bit better than in the Realtor.com article. And we can see here how homeownership actually, it's not a recent thing there where homeownership has declined. The real decline happened from 2005 to 2015. Also, homeownership increased then from 2015 to 2023. And then after 2023, homeownership rates went down again. And why? Why did homeownership fall? I don't think that it was because of high home prices. I believe strongly that it was high interest rates, and I don't think that that's a hot take. But I do think that high home prices played a role in it, and it is helping to keep people out of the home buying market. And this article from the Joint Center of Housing Studies from Harvard University talks about the disappearance of the moderately priced single-family home. And the argument posited in this little commentary here, it suggests that efforts to increase housing affordability are more often centered on building a bunch of apartment units, and that helps, but it's not necessarily a perfect solution for home buyers. Other policy decisions seem to disincentivize building these lower cost, so-called, I guess, starter homes. The quote is starting in the late 1960s, suburban towns in metropolitan Boston imposed layer upon layer of regulations, including large minimum lot sizes, stringent land use policies, and complicated and lengthy permitting procedures. As a result, most suburban home builders in greater Boston only produced houses for the high end of the market. At the same time, the starter homes built in previous generations in neighborhoods like mine are disappearing. I think that's... I always feel like these larger cities are a little bit more like regulatorily burdened than others. But that's something that's happening everywhere. I think there is a bias in general. If you're a builder, you're going to make more money building those larger homes anyways. So in a sense, there has to be some kind of conditions that encourage the smaller homes to be built. The solution that the author has suggested here is well, he mentions a novel effort that would allow the building of single-family homes on smaller lot sizes, and states and local governments could go further by acquiring land for development of various types of housing, providing financial assistance, tax exemption for these smaller homes. Finally, he says that protecting the existing stock of smaller homes is important too. He said, what the quote here is, just as they currently use floor to area ratios, local governments could set a formula based on the current volume of a house to limit how much within a certain number of years an owner could enlarge a structure, or if it were demolished, its replacement. In that way, small houses like the disappearing bungalows in my neighborhood might remain available for young couples and families who yearn to own their own home. It seems a little bit of like regulatory solution, a little too much red tape there. I don't know. What was your opinion on that?
Yeah, no, I don't love that idea.
Restricting remodeling.
Yeah, that seems kind of silly, honestly, and a good way to discourage people from buying those types of homes, right?
Instead of discouraging people, maybe discouraging the larger homes, maybe it's something to encourage the smaller homes. I think that this what he mentioned on lot sizes was really interesting too. There is a happy medium though, and I do wonder though if the way that the finances are and the way that the profit motive for these construction companies are, that you have to do something special with the government in order to make building these small homes affordable. But
I mean it comes down to NIMBYism, right? And you have towns that want to protect their school system, and it's a much larger problem than just snapping your fingers and throwing some regulatory stuff in.
A lot of this, the YIMBY or NIMBY situation boils down to where is the government going to exert its control? Is it at the neighborhood level or the city level or the state level? And essentially, I think so much of this housing has to do with the big boys. I don't want to say beating up of a little guys, but like, I'm sorry, the needs of the many, and this is very communist of me, but like the needs of the city outweigh the needs of the neighborhood. And this is, and it is a situation where you could help 400 households get housing, and cheaper housing could really flourish if you were to build an apartment building. But then the city would want that, but the neighborhood wouldn't want it. No neighborhood wants it. So you have to have, someone's got to take a hard line. And I think it is a situation where, all right, where's the real power going to be held, and who's going to be allowed to hold that power?
Well, I'll just put in my 2 cents here real quick. I think that market forces probably are the better way to go. I mean, if you look at, this article has a bias towards Boston, right? Yeah. And Indianapolis in the Midwest is nothing like Boston in terms of the way the city's laid out, in terms of land scarcity. I mean, we have land. We have tons of land. Yeah. So like, if people are willing to move, there are lots of low cost options in the Midwest, right? So it's not Boston, it's not Chicago, it's not New York or New Jersey or DC. Yeah. But look, there are lots of starter homes available in Midwest towns.
Yeah, no, that's true. I think that the crunch is felt a lot different in a lot of different places, and that it is something that it was part of the Midwestern narrative, where of like affordability. Maybe it's good to invest because this one has legs for growth. There's a gap between the affordability still, even as they built so much in the South. It's more affordable to get houses and to live in the Midwest. So I think that is really interesting. And like, I do think in a certain amount of this, housing unaffordability does kind of support continued rental housing demand. I think that the relationship between the two is a little more complicated, though. I know that there has been, again, another narrative of would-be home buyers just kind of going right in to be renters. Now, I think that might happen a little bit, but the apartment market did not suffer as much as single-family home prices did during the Great Recession, which points, I think, to some separation, actually, between home ownership and rental housing demand. I know on the whole, as housing moves, the apartment market moves, and the home ownership, the single-family home market moves. Generally, they'll go together, but there are some important points where they are diverging. I think right now is one of them. I wonder what happens here is that instead of a simple, like, more renters effect, is that you'll see a continued softening in home buying prices, and rental housing will be less impacted by these softening home prices. Basically, kind of, I have these doubts that high home prices are feeding directly into apartment or rental housing demand pipeline. I think that the relative affordability of apartment rents has insulated the apartment market a little bit from, and maybe a lot, from a potential downturn or correction in single family home prices. I think maybe we will see like headlines in the Washington Post and maybe Wall Street Journal about a shaky housing market. And, maybe you'll be at a cocktail party and you'll have to explain, well, not in the apartment market. Oh, I heard the housing market's going bad. Well, no. I think that we may be in this situation where home prices are going down and rents are going up, particularly in the Midwest. I think the South will be still a little shaky, but like you said, in the Midwest where things are already affordable, things are very, very stable here.
I'm going to just real quick say, I don't think we will see as big a housing correction in the Midwest as you're going to see elsewhere.
No,
right?
I agree.
In the Southeast,
sure.
Right? Because we just didn't build as much.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's the same story over and over.
And exactly. There's just more stability. There was just lower total building.
That's right.
So I think there may be some shakiness in the South, but we'll be relatively stable here.